The November 23rd, 2020 Labrador snow event was an historic early season snowfall and went straight into the record books.
Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History, now in its second year from the Weather Network in Canada.
A monstrous 75 centimeters of snow fell in just one single event all over Happy Valley-Goose Bay, and with that, they had officially accumulated more snow than most major Canadian cities would suffer in a full year. This day in weather history. This was simply too much to handle. At one point, the snow was falling at a ridiculous rate of 5 to 10 centimeters per hour. And that, my friends, is how you get to 75 centimeters in just one fall. This happened in one 2-day period that spanned starting on the 23rd, this day in weather history, and then wrapping up the next day on the 24th. But here's the thing. Most people thought the 30 centimeters hammering on the 23rd was enough. Boy, were they ever surprised with the follow-up 45 centimeters throughout the day on the 24th. But this is Happy Valley-Goose Bay, Labrador, North Atlantic. There is no way you are getting away with heavy snow and not brutal wind. These back-to-back days of heavy snow indeed combine the powerful northerly winds featuring gusts of up to 80 kilometers per hour, and that created near zero visibility and therefore dangerous travel conditions throughout the duration of the storm.
Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective. But oftentimes, they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. And just to dovetail from that, if I can, I'd like to remind you where you can catch this podcast. If you might be picking this up off our site or from within a story, you can look up or ask for This Day in Weather History, wherever you normally listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Alexa, and now every day on yahoo.ca.
Here now is some perspective. Medicine Hat, Alberta will typically see an average of 88 centimeters over a year, 365 days. What Happy Valley-Goose Bay just endured was 75 centimeters. Not exactly 88 centimeters, but they did it in less than 48 hours, not 365 days. So, what happened? The low rapidly deepened and intensified as it tracked through the northern Gulf of St. Lawrence on Monday night, and then would cross southern Labrador on Tuesday, and this would trigger the posting of widespread winter warnings for central sections of the region. The route it took was, quote, the absolute perfect track to maximize snowfall potential and squeeze every last snowflake out of the atmosphere. Those are the very descriptive words of Weather Network's meteorologist Tyler Hamilton. He went on to explain in an article posted at theweathernetwork.com back when the storm struck that it was a strong jet stream aloft that provided the added lift and support in the upper layers of atmosphere. Now you've got to understand, this will always enhance the draw and essentially just help further strengthen the surface low feature. But what gets lifted into the atmosphere? Moisture. And the raw content of moisture within the low that we're talking about was boosted up by the endless moisture source that was drawn up from the Atlantic Ocean. That was all the dynamics required to exact an unholy amount of snow in one area and seemingly all at once. The snow totals for Happy Valley-Goose Bay was enough to break several records for the region. It went down as the snowiest day in November history and the largest 2-day November snowfall. But was it the snowiest 2-day event ever? Close, but not quite. That mantle goes to the record highest 2-day total of all time, the 91 centimeters that fell in 2006 on January 14th through 15th, and that is still the record, so far anyway, to this day in weather history.
Hey, do you like the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. If you have an idea, go right now to wherever you're listening to me and rate us if you would please. It's on a 5-star system and we would love as many stars as you can afford. So rate us, but then also review us. This way we can always stay on top of how you'd like to see the show evolve. Then remember to subscribe to this podcast. Click the subscribe or follow button right there on the very same podcast homepage you're listening on. You'll be immediately reminded that the next day is ready to listen to, and you also have access to every episode in the archives. It dates back to June 1st of 2020, so there is a lot that we got to get caught up on this day in weather history.
Tomorrow is November 24th, and we are into another story of a storm gone mad. Man, I gotta tell y'all, shoulder season storms are the worst sometimes, and fall can be public enemy number one. For it was on November 24th, back in 2014, when strong winds downed a number of trees and cut power to thousands of people across much of southern Ontario. But what made this unusual? And what happened as a result to the most densely populated region in Canada? That's tomorrow on This Day in Weather History with me, your host, Chris May.